Over the next two episodes of Locked On Longhorns, we are predicting the win totals for each SEC team going into 2024, courtesy of the odds provided by FanDuel Sports.
You are Locked On Longhorns, your daily podcast on the Texas Longhorns. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Longhorns, the show. Jonathan Davis, your host. Today's episode of Locked On Longhorns is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers join today, and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. On today and tomorrow's episode, remember today is just part one, we will be discussing the SEC win total for every team in the conference. Yes, all 16. We're doing 8 today, 8 tomorrow, reacting to the FanDuel Sportsbook odds, the over odds, the under odds, and the win total provided by FanDuel Sportsbook. Once again, for all 16 SEC teams, 8 including Texas today, and then the remaining 8 tomorrow. All of that and more on today's episode of Locked On Longhorns, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So I was looking at the odds provided by FanDuel, the over and under odds, and the actual win totals for all 16 teams in the SEC going into the 2024 season. And I thought there were some very interesting spots, right? Some interesting spots where you might want to bet the over, some interesting spots where you might want to bet the under. So I guess the next 2 days, I'll be reacting to each team's win total, right? Going through their schedule game by game and deciding if it would be smarter to take the over or the under, right? So you're getting Texas Longhorn content, you're getting SEC college football content, and you're getting gambling content, right? It all goes hand in hand in 2024. You just can't escape it, right? And here we are on Locked On Longhorns, promoting gambling and talking about football and picking games 7 months before they happen, right? So, like I said, today we're going to start with the first 8 teams, but of course, this is Locked On Longhorns. I'm a little biased. We have to start with the Longhorns. After that, we go from Alabama to Vanderbilt in alphabetical order. But like I said, Texas skipped the list, right? When we look at Texas, FanDuel has their win total set at 10.5, right, for the 2024 season. So you'd have to either pick over, right, would be 11 or 12 wins, or under, which would be 10 wins or less. The over odds are plus 100, so a $100 bet on the over would win you $100, right, even. The under odds are minus 122, right? So if you bet $122 on the under, you would win 100, or you would have to bet $122 on the under to win 100. So what this is telling you is Vegas is telling you that they believe that Texas is closer to a 10-2 football team based on their schedule than an 11-1 football team. And I have to tend to agree. Now, what I will say is, because there's some Texas fans that, probably just threw up in their mouth a little bit when I said that and are mad at me. I picked Texas to go 10-2 last year. I was wrong. They went 11-1. I picked Texas to lose 2 games last year to Alabama and Kansas State, and they won both of those games, right? So if you want to take solace in anything, it's the fact that I was very wrong last year, and I very well could be very wrong this season as well. So I'm predicting Texas will go 10-2 on their 2024 schedule, so it would be smarter to take the under, right? If I was betting on it, I would take the under. August 31st, Colorado State, first game of the season. I think Texas smacks Colorado State by 20-plus points at home. September 7th at Michigan. I've said on the podcast, I think this should be a must-win game for the Texas Longhorns. I think the Texas Longhorns have the more talented roster and have more continuity on their coaching staff going into this game. But I think the style of play in this game will favor the Michigan Wolverines. I think it'll be a grinded out defensive, physical running game, type of matchup in week 2. And I think, just home field advantage. I think them bringing in Wink Martindale is a very sneaky, really good move in terms of defensive coordinator. I think that Michigan defense still will be one of the best in the country, and they might have the best running back in that matchup in Donovan Edwards between Texas and Michigan, at least at this point. I do love Jaden Blue. I just think Michigan finds a way to win that game, right? September 14th, UTSA. September 21st, Louisiana Monroe. Texas smacks both of them. First SEC game on September 28th against Mississippi State. I think Texas wins that game by double digits. You have a bye week, and then October 12th, you travel to Dallas to play in the Cotton Bowl against Oklahoma. In Red River, I believe you avenge your loss, and Steve Sarkisian starts off 2-2 against Oklahoma in the Red River rivalry, which I guess is fitting, right? To start off 2-2 in your first 4 years in that rivalry. October 19th against Georgia. I've said on the podcast that I believe that they're still the premier program in college football. I still think they're the best team. I think Kirby Smart is the best coach, and I think if they would have made the playoffs last year, they would be sitting on a three-peat. I think Texas fights hard in that game. They do have a home field advantage, but I don't think it's enough. I think Georgia finds a way to win, and they hand Texas their second loss of the season. And then after that, I think Texas runs the table at Vanderbilt against Florida on November 9th, at Arkansas, Kentucky at home on November 23rd, and then November 30th at Texas A&M, renewing that rivalry. I think Texas wins all 5 of those games. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I had to make sure that was 5. Yeah, I think Texas wins all 5 of those games. But I would be more comfortable taking the under because as of right now, 7 months away from these games, I hope they go undefeated, right? You know I'm a Texas fan, right? But as of right now, 7 months away from the season, I would predict that they would lose to Michigan and Georgia on the 2024 schedule. Now we're moving on to Alabama. Their over-under is set at 9.5, right? The over odds are plus 112. The under odds are minus 138. So to bet the over, betting 100 would give you $112. On the under, you would have to bet $138 to make $100. What Vegas is telling you is they believe that Alabama is closer to a 9-win team than a 10-win team in 2024. So let's take a look at the schedule. Their first game on Saturday, August 31st, is against Western Kentucky. They should win that game pretty handily. They play USF again. That was a game they struggled in last year. I'm going to give Alabama the benefit of the doubt and say they beat USF. At Wisconsin, I think this could be a game that could give them trouble, right? The first real test of the Kalen DeBoer era, and they are on the road, but it's still Alabama, right? Their roster is still filled with blue chip 4- and 5-star players. I don't think they'll lose to Wisconsin. Like I said, it could be a tough game, but they should find a way to win that game, probably by double digits still, right? Then they have a bye week, Saturday, September 28th. This is a mega matchup, one of the biggest matchups in the college football season. They'll be going against Georgia at home. Number 1, Georgia. I'm going to give the nod to Georgia in that matchup, but definitely would not be surprised if Alabama found a way to get the first big win of the Kalen DeBoer era and got an upset. But I'm going to give Georgia the win in that one. I'm going to say Alabama loses that game. Next game at Vanderbilt. They take it out on Vanderbilt and beat Vanderbilt by 40. Then they come back home Saturday, October 12th, and they beat South Carolina at home. Now, this one is interesting, right? At Tennessee, this is a game that I believe they lost last time they went to Tennessee, right? I think that's when Hendon Hooker was there and Bryce Young was still there, and Tennessee won this game like 51-45. I believe Nico Yamaleva, something like that, the 5-star freshman that, was jockeying back and forth with Arch Manning for the number 1 player in their class. He should be the starter. He did pretty well in the bowl game playing against Iowa. I'm going to say that Tennessee upsets Alabama in that game and hands them their second loss, right? Then Alabama comes back home and they play against Missouri. I think Alabama wins that game. They have a bye week. They go to Death Valley to play against LSU at night, more than likely, I would assume. And I think LSU is going to win that game and hand Alabama their 3rd loss of the season. Then they play Mercer at Oklahoma and Auburn in the Iron Bowl. I believe they win all 3 of those games, but I do think they lose 3 games to Georgia, at Tennessee, and at LSU. So I would take the under, like Vegas seems to think. Vegas believes Alabama will be a 9-win team in the 2024 season. Moving on to Arkansas, right? Arkansas plays Texas this year. Their win total is set at 5.5, right? The over odds are plus 132. The under odds are minus 162, right? So you have to bet 100 to make 132 for the over. You have to bet 162 to make 100 for the under. Vegas is telling you they think Arkansas is closer to a 5-win team than a 6-win team. So let's take a look at the schedule, right? First game against University of Arkansas Pine Bluff. Shout out to the HBCUs. I went to an HBCU, but Arkansas should definitely win that game. Week 2 at 18 Oklahoma State, right? We have gotten away from the Big 12. We don't have to deal with the Big 12 anymore, but we still know a lot about the Big 12, right? And this is the type of game that Mike Gundy just wins, right? At home in Stillwater. Crazy things happen in Stillwater. And yeah, it's Mike Gundy, right? I'm betting on Mike Gundy over Arkansas. I think Oklahoma State finds a way to win that game and hands Arkansas their first loss. UAB, right? Arkansas should find a way to win that game. At Auburn on September 21st, I'm giving Auburn the win there. So we have Arkansas with 2 losses in their first 4 games. Versus Texas A&M in AT&T Stadium, I'm giving that win to Texas A&M. Arkansas starts the season 2-3. Then they travel back home to play against Tennessee. I'm giving Tennessee the win in that matchup. So now Arkansas is 2-4. They play number 14 LSU at home. I'm giving LSU the win there. They're now 2-5. At Mississippi State, I give them a win. I say they're going to go 3-5. They're going to play Ole Miss and get beat up pretty bad. So they're now 3-6. They're going to play Texas 2 weeks after that in DKR and get beat pretty bad. Right. So they're now 3-7. Right. They're going to play Louisiana Tech and they're going to win that game. They're going to be 4-7. And then I think they lose to Missouri, their last game of the season on the road, and end up 4-8. So I do think, like Vegas, that Arkansas is closer to a 4 or 5 win team than a 6-win team. I would smash the under. I'm not betting on it, period. But if I was, I would definitely smash the under on Arkansas football in 2024. A quick word from our sponsors, and then we get into Auburn next. Their win total is set at 7.5. Can the Tigers get to 8 wins in 2024? I don't know. Today's episode of Locked On Longhorns is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts, for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right, the next team on the schedule is the Auburn Tigers. Shout out War Eagle. Over under set at 7.5. The over odds plus 124. The under odds minus 154. So Vegas thinks Auburn is closer to a 7-win team than an 8-win team or above. Let's go through the schedule. And once again, for my people that aren't addicted to gambling at this point, because I know the world is trying hard to get you there, right? For the over, you would have to bet 100 to make 124. For the under, you would have to bet 154 to cash out 100 on the bet, right? When we go through their schedule, let's see if we can find 8 wins for the Auburn Tigers on this schedule. Alabama and A&M, I'm giving that win to Auburn. They'll be at home. California at home, I'm giving that win to Auburn. So they start off the season 2-0. Early homecoming, geez, September 14th. It turned down there in Auburn, right? Against New Mexico, I'm giving them the win. I say they start off the season 3-0. Then they play Arkansas once again at home. I do not have a lot of faith in Arkansas, as you heard before the break. I'm giving Auburn that win. They start off 4-0, right? I think their first real test is Oklahoma. When Oklahoma comes to Auburn, I think they lose that game. And that's their first loss of the season. So now we have them 4-1 after they lose to Oklahoma. Their next game is at Georgia. That's good night, Irene. They're 4-2, but at least they get a week off after, right? The next matchup is pretty interesting at Missouri. I really don't know which way I want to go with this game. I think Missouri at home. I think Auburn's going to be a lot tougher in 2024, but I would still give a slight edge to Missouri. Then they go to Kentucky. I think they win that game. Then they go to Vanderbilt, or they play Vanderbilt at home. I believe they win that game. Then they have a week off. They play ULM. I think ULM loses that game. I was about to say something crazy, right? I think Auburn beats ULM. Then they play Texas A&M at home. I think Auburn finds a way to beat Texas A&M, right? So at this point, I've only given them 3 losses, right? Oklahoma, Georgia, Missouri. And then Alabama, I do think at home wins the Iron Bowl. But for plus money at plus 124, I do think Auburn can get to 8 wins in 2024. So if I was betting on this, I actually think taking the over might be a nice spot for the Auburn Tigers in 2024. And that still gives them 4 losses to the 4 toughest teams on their schedule, right? If they don't beat Oklahoma, Georgia, Missouri, or Alabama, they can still cash out the over, which is crazy, right? So take a chance, right? I think Auburn can definitely get to 8 wins in 2024 with Hugh Freeze. All right, so the next one is Florida, right? And Florida's down bad. A lot of people are saying Billy Napier won't last the season. He's on the hot seat. He might not even be there by the time they play Texas. And of course, they got this crazy schedule, which most people believe is probably the main reason that Billy Napier won't make it to next season. But Here goes nothing. Let's go through their schedule. So the over-under, the win total is set at 5.5 wins. I was growing up watching Florida win championships. This is crazy that their over-under is set at 5.5. The over is plus 144. So that means if you bet on them to win 6 games or more, a $100 bet would win you $144, which is insane. And if you're betting the under, you would have to bet $178 just to cash out $100 on the under. Vegas is screaming at you that they think Florida is a 5-win team or lower, right? Vegas does not think Florida can get to 6 wins this season. Otherwise, the odds would not be this tilted towards the under, right? So let's go through the schedule and see if we can find 6 wins for Florida. Here we go. Miami, Florida, right? They play Miami at home in the first week of the season. I think this is a bounce back season for the Miami Hurricanes. I know we've been saying that for the last 20 years, but for some reason, I actually believe it. This year, I think Miami beats Florida for the first game of the season. Then they play Samford. I'm giving Florida the edge against Samford, right? That's your first win of the season. Let's see if we can find 4 more, right? Or 5 more, I guess, right? Because they'd have to get to 6. Texas A&M at home. Ooh, this is tough. It's Aggie. That's little brother. It's Aggie. It's Florida. I don't know. This schedule tough, man. I'm going to give Florida the win, right? I'm going to say it's Texas A&M. I do think this will be a tough game for Florida. I think Texas A&M has a really good chance to win, but yeah, I'm gonna say Florida beats Texas A&M, but it's gonna be a nail biter for sure. I won't be watching it, but it's gonna be a nail biter. At Mississippi State, I give Florida the win there. So they do start off a very tough schedule, 3-1 before their first bye, with that first loss being to Miami, right? Then they play UCF at home. I think this is a very sneaky tough game, right? I think this is a very sneaky tough game against UCF. Down in the Big 12, but I'm going to give Florida the benefit of the doubt and say they find a way to win this game, right? So they only have to win 6 games to hit the over. And right now I have them at 1, 2, 3. I have them at 4-1, right? You would think they get to 6 wins if they start off 4-1. Here goes nothing. At 17, Tennessee, I'm giving Tennessee the advantage in that matchup. Hopefully I remember, when I go through other schedules, who I've already picked, because I don't want to be embarrassing or embarrass myself and then pick Florida to win on one schedule and then pick their opponent to win on their schedule, right? So hopefully I remember. But at 17, Tennessee, I'm picking Tennessee to win that game. So I now have Florida at 4-2. Kentucky at home, Florida wins that game. So I have them at 5-2 going into the last 5 games on their schedule. So now people are saying, oh, of course they're going to hit the over. 5-2 this early? Listen to this, right? Georgia in Jacksonville, Florida. Florida loses that game. At Texas, Florida loses that game. LSU at home, Florida loses that game. Ole Miss at home, Florida loses that game. At Florida State, Florida loses that game. So yes, Florida starts off the season 5-2, and that over looks shiny. It looks like you cashed your bet and you're just going to rake in a bunch of dough. And then they're going to lose the last 5 games on their schedule. And Vegas is going to be right, like they almost always are, with their win total set at 5.5, because Florida, in my opinion, will go 5-7 this football season. All right. So that was Auburn, Florida. Who did I do? That was Arkansas. I did Arkansas before the break. Okay. So that was Auburn, Florida. All right. One more. Now we get to Georgia, right? Who I believe is the premier team in the conference, right? I think all other 15 teams are fighting to play Georgia in the SEC championship this year. The over-under is set at 10.5, even odds both ways, right? You would have to bet 110 to make 100 if you bet the over. You'd have to bet 110 to make 100 if you bet the under, right? So Vegas is dead even, right? They're not leaning anyway, right? They said whether you think, Georgia is a 10-win team, whether you think they're an 11-win team, they're going to be really good in 2024, right? I think Georgia will go 11-1 in the 2024 season, but I'm going to go through the schedule game by game and tell you which games I think they win and what's the one game I think they lose. Spoiler alert, I've already picked them to beat Texas, so it's not the Longhorns, right? If you've been listening intently. All right, their first game is in Atlanta against Clemson. They just dominate these games, right? They dominate these games, and I don't get how teams keep scheduling them to play them in Atlanta, right? But here it goes. Clemson is fairly close, but they won't be fairly close in this game. Georgia's going to smack Clemson. Then they play Tennessee Tech. They're going to win that game handily. At Kentucky, they're going to win that game handily. They have a bye at Alabama. Certainly will be a very tough game. I think it's going to be an interesting game. Like I said, a mammoth type matchup, one of the biggest games of college football this year. Still think Georgia finds a way to win that game at Alabama. Auburn at home and then Mississippi State at home the next 2 weeks. I think Georgia wins both of those games by 2 touchdowns. At number 2, Texas. Obviously, this is Locked On Longhorns. Obviously, I'm biased. I think the Longhorns put up a good fight. I think they come out and play up to their competition, right? Even though Texas is on, or at least getting there on the level of Georgia at this point. I don't want to get too crazy yet. But yeah, I think it's a very close game, right? I think Texas is in it to the end, but I think Georgia finds a way to win. Then they have another bye week. They play Florida. I've already told you Florida loses their last 5 games. One of those is Georgia. They're going to lose that game as well. At 7, Ole Miss. I think Lane Kiffin finally gets over the hump. That's their one loss I'm predicting. Really coming into this, I said Georgia's going to go 12-0, but I'll give them one loss. I think Lane Kiffin finally gets over the hump. This is by far the most talented roster he's ever had at Ole Miss. Ole Miss is going to be at home. I think they find a way in a tough SEC matchup to beat Georgia, and Lane Kiffin gets his first win over Alabama or Georgia at Ole Miss. They get over the hump. Georgia loses that game, but then they beat Tennessee at home. They beat UMass. They beat Georgia Tech to end the season. The over still hits. They end up at 11-1. Quick word from our sponsors, and then we get into Kentucky and LSU to round out the show. Should you hit the over or the under on their win total provided by FanDuel? Today's episode of Locked On Longhorns, once again, is brought to you by FanDuel. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the National Basketball Association. All right, the next team is Kentucky. Their over-under is sitting at 6.5. The over plus 120. So you would have to bet $100. You bet $100, you would win 120. So you would gain $20 there. And then the under, you would have to bet 150 to cash out 100 on that bet. So what is Vegas telling you? Vegas is telling you that they think Kentucky is closer to a 6-win team than a 7-win team, right? Which is probably fair. So let's look at the schedule and see what we got, right? Southern Miss, their first game at home. I think Kentucky wins that game. South Carolina, their first SEC game at home this year. I'm going to give the nod to Frank Beamer, and I'm going to say Kentucky starts off 1-1. Then they play Georgia at home. Hey, it's good for attendance, right? I think Kentucky starts off 1-2. Then they play Ohio. They get back to 500. They are 2-2 after 4 games. At Ole Miss, they lose that game. They are now back under 500 at 2-3. They have a bye week. They get back to 500 by beating Vanderbilt at home. So they're 3-3 after 6 games. At Florida, I believe I gave Florida the win in that game. So they're back under 500. They're back under 500 at 3-4 at this point. Auburn, can't remember who I gave that win, but I think Auburn would win. Probably gave it to Auburn. So, right, hold on. Let me go back through the schedule. I'm sorry. I got them at 4-4. 2-2 after 4 games, 3-3 after 6 games. Okay. And then I have them at 3-5. I think they lose to Florida on the road and Auburn at home. 3-6. I think they lose to Tennessee on the road as well. They beat Murray State, so they're now 4-6. They lose to Texas, so they're now 4-7, and they lose to Louisville at the end of the season, and they are 4-8. Their under odds are -150. If I was betting on it, I'd smash the under. I think Kentucky is nowhere close to a 7-win football team in 2024. But, they could surprise me. It is the SEC where everything just means more. Getting out of here with LSU, their over-under is set at 9.5. Odds are pretty even, right? Over odds -114. So $114 bet would win you 100, and the under odds are -106, right? So $106 bet would win you 100. Vegas is kind of staying neutral on this one, and I could see, LSU either way. I could easily see them be a 9-win team again, like they were last year with the Heisman winner, and I could see them taking that next step and being a 10-win team, right? So versus USC in Las Vegas, I think USC will be really good. I think even with them losing Caleb Williams, they'll have a bounce-back season. But if I'm taking an SEC team versus a Pac-12 team, especially a Pac-12 team that has shown in the past they can't play in the trenches, give me LSU all day. Right? The second week of the season, they play Nichols. LSU starts off 2-0, their first home game at South Carolina. They start off 3-0. Then UCLA comes to town. Chip Kelly just left. New regime, new players. I think LSU starts off 4-0. Then they play South Alabama at home before their bye. LSU wins their first 5 games of the season. Saturday, October 12th, at home, they play Ole Miss. I think they avenged their loss. They gave up 55 points to Ole Miss last year. I think LSU knocks off Ole Miss in what'll probably be a top 10 matchup at that point. Ole Miss and LSU likely both will be undefeated on Saturday, October 12th. So we have LSU starting, I have LSU starting off their first 6 games, 6-0. At Arkansas, I think they win that game, right? So they're now 7-0. At Texas A&M, I think Texas A&M gets the upset, and now LSU is 7-1. They have a bye week. They play Alabama at home. I think I went through this and I picked LSU to win that game. Yeah, so we got LSU now at 8-1 with 3 games to go. At Florida, Vanderbilt, I think LSU wins those games. And then I think Oklahoma finds a way to beat LSU at home in the last regular game of the season. So the odds are pretty even, but if I had to pick, I'm picking the over. I think Brian Kelly and LSU get back to their 10-win season winning ways, right? Yes, I think LSU wins 10 games in the regular season in 2024. Thank you for tuning in to part 1 of the SEC win totals. Starting tomorrow, we will start with Mississippi State and go all the way to Vanderbilt, right? Once again, picking the SEC win totals courtesy of the odds from FanDuel Sportsbook for all 16 SEC teams. Hook 'em and peace.